All right, let's take a look at a different project. This is a video from a couple of years ago that I made about Coach Al in the fitness center, and I just wanted to show you where I placed my cuts in my B-roll and how I use B-roll in this project. So let's just watch the whole video through real quick. It's about 1.5 minutes long. And one tip, by the way, if you have a window that's outlined in blue, that means that you've clicked inside of it and you've selected that window. So if I select a timeline window, you'll see that blue box show up around it. Project window, same thing. Source monitor, program feed. So if I'm in any of these boxes and I hit the accent key on the keyboard in the upper left-hand corner, it will full screen that particular window, and if I hit it again, it'll go back to its normal spot. So I'm going to full screen this. Let's just watch it through. It's about 1.5 minutes long.
When we talk about sports performance, we're talking about training geared towards each sport. My number one philosophy is training movements. Like say for instance, if I'm working with lacrosse, I know lacrosse is a game where you got short spurts, bursts, you got a lot of agility. So if you can move better in here, you're gonna move a lot better on the field. Performance is not as much as how much weight you're doing. It's based on, are you moving fluently? Are you explosive? With the younger kids, they work on more agility, building those fast twitch muscles so they become great athletes. Try to keep them away from weights as much and have them do a lot of body weight exercise. Sports also translates to, normal everyday living. Like I tell them, if you want to win, it starts with nutrition. I talk to them the difference between, putting 93 in your gas tank versus putting 87 in your gas tank. It lasts longer, and my car drives a whole lot better. You put the right stuff in your body, you're going to be able to compete at a higher level. It's easier to compete on the field because you got an opponent, but when you're in here, you got to be fighting yourself. You got to train better than you did yesterday. I have to train you better than I did last week. If we can be very motivated and work twice as hard in here, then over there on the field, it's easy.
All right, so let's break down this project a little bit. It looks a little bit more complicated than it actually is. What we have going on here is in video track 1, we have our interview footage. In audio track 1, we have our audio interview. So if I switch off video track 2, you can see that it's just our interview under there. And then if I solo the audio track 1,
they become great athletes.
That's just our interview audio. In audio track 2, we have music. Video track 2, we have B-roll footage. Audio tracks 3 through 7 are some sound effects. And video tracks 3 through 6 are a mix of some titles, some footage that I think I just decided to add at the end, but I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it, so I put it in video track 4 instead of putting it down over what was previously there, and a few transitions up here too. So I want to take a look at how I used B-roll in this film, and in some spots I think I did a pretty good job, and then in other spots I'll show you one place in particular where I feel like this project could have gone to another level if I had made some different decisions. So let's look at this section right here, and we'll just watch maybe 15 seconds or so.
Performance is not as much as how much weight you're doing. It's based on, are you moving fluently? Are you explosive?
Okay, so really short little segment here, but it's a good example of how I was using B-roll. So Coach Al is sharing part of his philosophy here. He's talking about how it's not about the amount of weight, it's more about the way that you're moving. So I start off with a clip where these girls are carrying weights, but they're not extremely heavy weights. They're not what you think of, I guess, as bodybuilding exercises. So that was just a way to show how it's not about the amount of weight, which I think is what Coach Al is saying underneath this clip. So you can see this clip lasts for, if you hover over it, it'll tell you 2 seconds and 4 frames. Right there it says duration at the bottom.
Performance is not as much as how much weight you're doing.
So I started this clip right at the beginning of this phrase, and this is a good rule of thumb. When you're covering up interview audio with B-roll footage, it's a good idea to start your footage at the beginning of a phrase or the beginning of a sentence, and then to make all of your cuts also at the beginning or ends of phrases. So watch this.
Performance is not as much as how much weight you're doing.
So that's the end of the phrase, and you can see here that's where I'm making my cut. He's going to start a new sentence here or a new phrase.
It's based on...
So it's based on, that's another It's a short phrase, but it's a good cutting place because he kind of pauses after he says on.
It's based on, are you moving fluently?
So, are you moving fluently? And I used 2 shots here because it's actually covering the exact same exercise, and I wanted to show the dynamic nature of the exercise. So I got a really tight shot and then went to a wider shot. But these 2 clips also cover one phrase.
Are you moving fluently?
Are you moving fluently? So that's what that's covering up.
Are you explosive?
And then, are you explosive? And obviously this is an explosive drill that he's doing here. And then, so I left a little gap here in the interview audio that you can see in our A-roll tracks, and that was because I wanted to give the piece a little bit of room to breathe. I didn't want him to be constantly talking throughout the minute and a half of this video, and I also wanted to get some of that background audio in there with this footage that's happening. So let's just watch this one more time real quick.
Performance is not as much as how much weight you're doing. It's based on, are you moving fluently? Are you explosive?
So I kind of felt like these 2 clips just punctuated what he was saying. It's another explosive drill and then an agility drill right after that, and just kind of highlights and underlines what Coach Al had just said. All right, so let's watch this section through right here. I'm still 2 years later. I'm pretty unhappy with the decisions I made. So let's watch.
Sports also translates to, normal everyday living. Like I tell them, if you want to win, it starts with nutrition. I talk to them the difference between, putting 93 in your gas tank versus putting 87 in your gas tank.
So you can probably see what I'm talking about there. I wish that I had gotten footage of nutrition. It could have been footage of people going through line at the dining hall. It could have been footage of, somebody eating a sandwich before a workout. I don't know, anything that could have illustrated that better. Instead, I just used, for part of it, I used a shot of Coach Al talking because I did feel it was important to get him on screen again, because this video was actually meant to introduce him to the community a little bit. He had been here a couple of months, but a lot of people didn't know who he was yet, so we wanted to show people. So I did want to get that in there. But then after that, he's talking about everyday life and, could have just had people walking around campus would have been good. And then he's talking about nutrition. I have this shot of lunges, and that just, doesn't make sense. And same thing here. He's still talking about nutrition. So, I made cuts in the same way where I was making my cuts at the beginnings and ends of sentences and phrases. So I think it flows fine, but there's a disconnect between what's happening in the B-roll track and what's happening in the A-roll track. This is why we made those detailed B-roll plans. We want to make sure that whatever our interview subject is talking about, we would like to have footage of that. Because the whole idea of B-roll is to cover up our interviews to make them more interesting to watch, because we don't want to stare at the interview subject the entire time while they're talking. So real quick, I just want to take a look at one more project and show you how if you don't have interview audio to guide the cuts that you're making, you can still make cuts that are going to make your film flow really smoothly. So let's just watch just a little bit of this. Okay, so what I was going for in this video was a fast pace, a lot of clips, one after another that didn't feel rushed, but they were only on screen for, half a second, maybe a second and a half at the most. So what I was trying to do was find similar motions that the athletes were going through. If somebody was coming off the blocks, then maybe I would cut from one runner coming off the blocks to a different runner who's a couple of strides into the race, and then as they approach a hurdle, maybe I'd cut to another runner who's jumping over that hurdle. So anyway, that's what I was trying to do, and with all of these fast-paced cuts, I didn't want it to feel rushed. I didn't want it to feel jarring to the audience. So what I tried to do was make all of the cuts on downbeats in the music. So what I mean by that is at the beginning of a measure in the music, or just at like a hard bass note. So let's watch just the first 15 seconds one more time. So we start off slow here. But so that's the first cut that you can really notice there that's happening on sort of one of those beginnings of a measure, or sort of a bass note. And if you zoom in, this is where your waveform gets really helpful. So you can see that it spikes here. And so I made the cut right where this audio spikes. Same thing here. This boom, and that's where I make the cut. And it just makes it flow a lot better. Same thing here with that sort of rushing sound. So you can see all of these cuts in the beginning are on those downbeats. Now, there are plenty of reasons why you might want to not make cuts on those really obvious notes, but it really does help to make your video flow more smoothly. And with a fast-paced video especially, you want to make sure that your cuts are happening in very intentional places. It's not, random, so it doesn't feel jarring. So that's just something to help you as you continue with your rough cuts and then start working on your final cuts. So your rough cut, remember, doesn't need to be perfect, but do start to adjust where your B-roll is. Make sure it's hitting those beginnings and ends of phrases. It's just going to make your piece flow a lot more smoothly. So thanks for watching, and as always, let me know if you have any questions.